Hi guys, I'm super excited for today's special guest. I have on John Sotomayor, who is the owner of Embrace Magazine. He is the editor-in-chief there, so that is his personal magazine. He's also worked for a lot of different magazines through his career. He worked on many in New York, and you'll get to find out a little bit more about his story. He is a 2024 GLAAD magazine nominee, so that's super exciting for him, and I'm just super excited for you guys to hear his story. Super unique, super different, so let's go check it out. So John, how are you doing today?
I'm doing great. How are you?
I'm doing pretty good. Enjoying this like semi-warm, coolish weather we've got going on.
Yeah, it's awesome.
It is awesome. I think the last time I did my podcast, it was like frigid, so I'm glad that we're not having such cold weather.
Yeah.
In Florida, I think everybody wants to escape that.
Yeah.
So kind of tell everybody what you do and kind of how you got into doing what you do.
Sure. Well, first, thank you for having me on your podcast. So super cool to be here.
Well, thank you, and thank you for coming on.
Absolutely. So I'm the publisher of Embrace Magazine. I've been in media now for about 20 years. I started in my native New York City and do this magazine in Ocala. It has a national, even international reach, and our focus is to be as diverse and inclusive as possible. We provide content that is attractive to both the LGBTQ community and the straight community. The idea is to build bridges. So our ideal straight person who we want to attract would be somebody who is curious about the community, doesn't know that much, but it's a great place for them to come take a look. So it's a safe place for everybody.
Okay, that's awesome. I definitely think that's something that Ocala and I think across the board needs. I think we need to have open conversations with straight people and gay people where things aren't heated, but like open, genuine dialogue. I think if we had more of that, people would realize that we have a lot more in common than what we don't.
Absolutely. I agree.
So can you tell us a little bit about how you got started into your career of publishing?
Sure. Well, I started in New York City. I was a paralegal for a law firm at the time. I had gone to law school in D.C. but did not finish that degree. It was in the 90s, and being outed was a little tough. So it kind of hit me, affected my grades. So I went back and worked as a paralegal. Okay. But the opportunity came for me to do a little writing. And I started as an entertainment reporter for a company based out of Texas, ETV, and really enjoyed the experience. So I wanted to expand on that. I was transitioning from New York to Florida and wanted to expand on it here. And I just really fell in love with what Ocala had to offer. At the time, they had two great magazines. Now they have more. And those at the time was Ocala Magazine, Ocala Style. Ocala Magazine and I started working together, and that led to the opportunity to write our first ever gay life story in Ocala, Marion County. A story had fallen through the cracks. The publisher at the time said, John, you're an openly gay man. What do you think about writing a gay life story? And I thought, that is a great idea, but not as a filler. We got to do that some time, 3 months into it. She agreed. So we decided to look into what's possible. I thought maybe a day in the life of a gay person, but I don't think Marion County was ready for that.
I don't think they still are.
Yeah. Can you imagine, what's it like at the Copa or whatever?
Yeah, no.
And then the second thought was a historical aspect. And I looked at what was going on in Gainesville and Ocala, and some of the history was there, 1950s or whatever, but wasn't going to be that appealing. So I went with what was Ocala, Marion County all about? And I thought it's about faith and families. So we followed that angle, found a really cool story about two couples, 2 men, 2 women, all in the medical field. They wanted to have children together. So they did kind of what they call the swirl, so that you can't tell who's the parent. And they had great children. The little girl, when she was a toddler, would call the parents Mommy Brown and Mommy Blue, based on their eye color.
Okay.
And she did the same thing with the parents, Daddy Brown, Daddy Blue. She did that all on her own. Parents didn't, start it for her. And everybody found that so engaging that whenever they were at the store and she'd do that, people just naturally gravitated to them. It wasn't scary or alienating. It was fun. And so I thought that is a great way to build this story, to get people coming together. I told that story as the intro, and it really worked. We had another great profile on 2 African-American women who raised their own children, and they encouraged their friends to be at the house. Some of the children had troubled backgrounds, and they picked up on it. They wanted to stay there as long as possible. Long story short, the 2 women asked their parents if children could stay there for whatever they were doing, whether it was trouble financially or trouble with jail sentence or something. The children could stay there. So long story short, the children loved the experience there. We interviewed the children as they were young adults, and they referred to them as their mamas. And it didn't matter that they were all either white or Hispanic or something. And it didn't matter they were black, didn't matter that they're lesbian. It just absolutely loved them. So that again was a charming story to really showcase what this community was all about. So well received. We had hundreds of letters of support. So after that experience, the publisher of Gainesville Today contacted me and said, "Would you do the second ever mainstream gay life publication, a story?" And I said, "Sure, what an honor." And after that experience, I thought, if I ever have the opportunity to do my own publication, that's what I want to do. So that was the genesis of what's now Embrace.
Okay, yeah, no, that's super awesome. I think that's like perfect for Ocala too. I think if we more so looked at it that people and children just need a lot of love.
Yes.
And it doesn't necessarily matter where that comes from, but
Absolutely.
that, I think everything in the root cause and overall really should be focused on love.
Yes.
And that we are all just really here to love each other. And I think that's a great like viewpoint and aspect, and something that I feel like Ocala still needs to a degree. I think overall everybody could use a little bit of sprinkling of love,
And I think people are doing that. I'm seeing and meeting a lot of people in the community because they're aware of the magazine now, and they're sharing their stories or ideas. You see them more open. You know what I mean? I think it's great. For instance, them having a drag night downtown, for instance, as opposed to a place hidden in the alleyways somewhere far out of the main view. It's such a difference, right?
It is. It's a huge difference, and I think Ocala's really just gotten a bad rap for being like anti-gay, like any culture, when in all honesty, I think Ocala has a rich culture of all kinds, whether you're African American, Hispanic, or whatever, and whether you're gay. I mean, I feel like the gay community needs a lot of growth and a lot of help. I think they've done pretty well with the Hispanic groupings and people of color and stuff, and they've really gotten that to be pretty solid, I think, here in Ocala. And now I think it's time for the gays for us to unite and hopefully accomplish the same thing. And I do think it's great. And unfortunately, I think we've had some miscommunications across like lines between city people and gay people, and maybe things weren't handled the best. But I think overall it's something we can overcome.
I think so.
And I'm hoping. I mean, I don't know about you, but I've never personally dealt with a whole lot of hate here in Ocala.
I personally have not, but of course there are people who have a harder time. I've been described as passable, and so there are other people who may have a harder time and experience, and we have to be attuned to that.
Of course.
We have to be, just welcoming to everybody. I think, I personally love the artistic group. People with different colored hair, or they present themselves differently. Be uniquely you. That's what I love to see, and I think that's being more open here now.
It definitely is. I think the art community coming in and the Max and all of that has really shaped Ocala, and I think I find that I get along with those people better. I don't really get along with the white Christian Ocalians.
Right.
They don't really like me too much because I'm not passable. I mean, I'm pretty gay. I mean, it's like I live that life and people know that I'm gay. There's no questioning that, and that's okay. I'm proud of who I am.
Sure.
But I think it's nice to be in a group of people that don't care, and that they're deal with just as much, I think, pushback from just the average person as I do in some sense, because having wacky hair and piercings and dressing in whatever attire that you want to wear may not be socially acceptable per se, even though it really shouldn't matter, but that's just how people are.
Exactly.
Yeah. So I kind of want to go into the next question, and I think you've kind of said this, but I want to like dive a little bit deeper into as like your why Embrace, like why you like really like your thought process fully on why you created what you did.
Sure, I'd be happy to. So to give a deeper background on myself, being from New York City, I first was in the legal field before I went into media. It's completely different. Media is more creative. You can be more free. Legal is more structured and all that kind of button down stuff. And so when I was younger, plus I'm also 55. So when I grew up in my 20s, it was the early 90s. Very different time frame.
Very different
back then. Yeah, people, because of the HIV/AIDS crisis, people had to be more cautious about how they present themselves and not have a backlash. Anyway, I played it safe, so to speak. I wasn't out there going to pride events or fighting the cause and going to events. I played it safe. And now being older, I really wish I could be more on the front lines. I've actually attended a lot of conferences this past summer, including Victory Institute in Washington, D.C., where it's more politically activated and they look people to step up and run for positions. And I was really impressed with how engaged younger people were, who they are, and what they want to do to the community. And I wrote in my publisher's letter of my magazine, it's time to not do the fight from the sidelines, but on the front lines. And that's what I want to do more of. So that's kind of like my why. For those who have stepped forward before me and made the path clear for me, I want to also contribute and do that. And my way is through media and the magazine.
Yeah, no, I think that's great, and I kind of think my younger, like I'm Gen Z, so I think the younger age group, we more so want to be on the front lines and to have those conversations. I even find myself now kind of being put in those positions because I'm very outspoken and I am who I am, and I feel like coming from a very religious background and dealing with very religious parents, I'm more apt to see both sides of the spectrum. So I understand, not that I always agree with them, but I'm more apt to sympathize, I think, and try to come up with some middle ground that everybody can be okay with. Unlike other people, which they can have their ideas and beliefs too. Everybody's welcome to do that.
Absolutely.
But I think I think in Ocala especially, to get things pushed forward, we need some conversations and positivity, and to just really have an actual conversation and not be, not watch the TV and think that every gay person's trying to push their agenda on to children. That's just what everybody thinks anymore.
Absolutely. And I think that's why Embrace has such a unique position, because not only are we a consumer lifestyle publication, which touches on all aspects of culture, but we're also a news source. So we will touch on the big subjects. For instance, in the first year of our magazine, 2020, we did cover the COVID epidemic and how that affected the HIV community, who were more susceptible to the virus. If you had a compromised your immunity, it could affect you. And so many people who had the HIV status didn't want to come forward. They were afraid, And so we had it at extra touch. We used LGBTQ nurses, lesbian nurses, who spoke on it and how they helped these people because they were related and can approach them because they're part of the same community. So that was interesting perspective on the COVID story that nobody else was writing about. We also wrote about the Black Lives Matter. That was big in 2020. And we did it on the point of the trans community. Trans lives matters. I approached several trans persons here in Ocala. They also were African American, to step forward, and they shared their stories, and they were heartbreaking stories about the things they had to deal with. I would have to say, this comes back to our conversation earlier about passable and who's acceptable and not. The drag community, the trans community, where I think it's more controversial for the mainstream people, it would be harder on them. Some of these ladies said that they couldn't go out at the daytime. They had to go dressed as who they are at night. There are certain communities they would never go in because they were afraid of being backlashed. So we covered that perspective, and it was very, very eye-opening for me to learn more about what they had to go through.
Yeah, no, I definitely think it's it's just an interesting perspective, and I think that it goes to show like how heavily media and all of that really have an influence on us as people, and like our views and how we interact and who we look for. I think even in a crowd per se is it's like always on our subconscious mind of whatever these topics are.
Right.
And that kind of actually goes into the next question is speaking of influences, like who's had like the biggest influence on you? It could be on your career or you as a person. It's
sure. Well, interestingly enough, for my career, I would have to say he's an ally. He's a designer who he and I worked together 3 times in our career. He was the creative director of Ocala magazine at the time, Jamie Mark. He has a Jewish background. I'm Roman Catholic. He's married, has kids. I'm openly gay. I mean, it's like total odd couples there. But he is so good at what he does and so focused on his craft that I wanted to be that good with my writing. He and I worked together again for Acres Media Group in Leesburg when I worked for that company. And I wrote for Lake and Sumter Style, Welcome to Lake, other publications. He was there as well. And so when my first designer could no longer stay around, he also worked with me at Acres Media Group. Jamie stepped in, and his company is M Agency. And he has positively influenced my career path. One of the things that I'm now also is a board member of the Florida Magazine Association. Jamie was a board member first and then became president. And now I'm on track to be president. I'm secretary now. Hopefully, if the succession pattern moves forward, I'll be vice president next August and then on track for president. So I see what he's done in this profession and I admire it. So that's what I want to do as well. For me personally, who's influenced me, I know this is going to be a very common answer, but my parents definitely influenced me. My mom was very loving and creative, and she nurtured the creative side of me. My father was very practical minded and intellectual, and he focused on that. So that kind of combination is who I became today. I'm a hybrid of both. So I'm practical, but also free flowing and easygoing.
I definitely think that makes a good writer for sure.
Yes.
Yeah, because you have to kind of have the creative, but also like, especially for magazines,
Yeah.
like that like combination of practical meets creative, and how's that all going to play out?
Definitely helps running the business. A lot of writers are married to their words and they don't know anything except the creative process. Someone who has a practical side can see it as a business and see how they can have to adjust their writing so it accommodates the assignment.
Okay, yeah, no, that's super, super interesting, and a great perspective as well. Now, I was going to talk a little bit about what does like a typical day look like for somebody that's running a magazine. I know you're very busy.
Very busy. First of all, you're your own scheduler. You're running with multiple hats all day long. Nothing's ever patternized the same, which actually works well for me. I don't like routine. I don't like mundane. I like something creative and different every time. That's how I am with my menu selections. That's how I am with my dating. That's everything. I just like variety. So what is my day like? Well, it definitely involves some level of working with my team, whether the writers, designers, photographers. Constant communication is key, especially the way we run our business now. Like a lot of businesses, they run it from home. And we have independent contractors everywhere. So very few are actually based in Ocala now. They're scattered throughout Florida, scattered throughout the country, and I even have some writers who are international. Yeah, my international news writer is based in France.
Oh,
so,
wow.
yeah, he's an interesting guy. He's a comedian, actor, has all these skills. He's originally from the UK, has a strong following in Australia, where he's lived a number of years, and now France. And he is one dynamic, sharp guy. Yeah. So that's usually what my day is like, communicating with all. There's some level of writing for myself for the magazine or editing. And then I have to put my business hat on. So what does that mean? That means looking for, since we're still a startup, looking for a media partner, looking for investors, looking for advertisers. It's constantly on the move, trying to grow and adapt. The other aspect, which I love, is the social side of it. So I do get to go to a lot of events. You're invited a lot, and it's just fun for me.
Yeah, no, I'm sure it sounds like a good time, and also just like it's also just a lot of work. I'm sure I can't even imagine like having to juggle all of that and having to write. I mean, I guess I can kind of relate to that being a realtor. Like I do play a lot of hats. I don't know if people always realize that as a realtor you do that. You know, sometimes you have to pick up the mortgage hat and deal with that. Sometimes you
Yeah.
got to pick it up and deal with title, and then you also play therapist and just like all kinds of interesting roles that people I don't think realtors deal with. But you know, it's so personal. You can't get more personal than your
Yes.
house.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah. So I think that's part of it. Now, I kind of wanted to ask, and this was something I was excited about to ask you about as well, is your perspective on AI, because it's probably one of the most hot topics
Oh, yeah.
when it comes to magazines, publishers, any writers, book writers, all of that.
Yeah.
It's a hot topic.
It definitely is. It's the one, we run a lot of conferences. Again, I'm a board member of the Florida Magazine Association. I'm also a board member of the National Lesbian and Gay Journalists Association, now known as the Association of LGBTQ Journalists. It's a mouthful.
That is a lot.
And it's on everyone's talking board. You know, what is AI going to do for our industry and how do we manage it? Of course, the big question for journalists and writing is ethics. You know, how do you ethically write a story or use other people's material to research for the story? How do you handle originality? You know, with a story, making sure that all the details are correct. There's so much going on that's, you know, changing the field. And then on the design side, you know, we're all seeing these now deep fake photos, you know. There's a lot of discussion now on a photo that appeared with Donald Trump and Martin Luther King, you know, and it's obviously a fake. Martin Luther King died in 1968, and Donald Trump in the photo was his age now, you know. But it's creating controversy, you know. And we as publishers and editors want to make sure that we have authenticity on our pages, that you know, we don't have problems with copy that is not copyrighted or not safe to use.
Okay. Yeah, no, I think I guess my concern too is like the longevity? Like, do you think that magazines will continue? Do you think they'll morph into something else? Like, what do you think about that as well?
So, yes, so magazines, like all print, is digitizing now. So you're finding it on your mobile devices, you're finding it on the internet. That is the way people are sourcing their information now. So we have to adapt. We do have print issues still. I just love them. I just love the idea of the coffee table style book. You know, we have beautiful covers like this beautiful man right there, and more. But we have to adapt. We have to see what's going to be marketable, and that changes the whole game. You know, how do you advertise for it? How do you monetize it? How is everything shared? You know, it's very different, but I find it fascinating.
Okay, what are some ways that you're finding that you're able to, like, combat, like, the age of video, I guess, that we're in? Because, I mean, reading is just not as common as it used to be. And now, you know, video and really audio in some sort has become much more popular, because unfortunately Americans are kind of lazy when
Right.
it comes to reading. We don't like to read.
So what a lot of magazines are doing is shorter copy.
Okay.
And then we're also multimedia aspecting it. So what many use is video in their website platform.
Okay.
But what we like to do, which a lot of people haven't done yet, is use it in our flipbook content.
That's what I was thinking when you're talking.
Yeah.
Okay.
So the idea was, like, you remember the Harry Potter movies where we would look at the newspaper page and the photo would come to life? So how cool would that be if we could do that? Of course, we can't do it in actual paper, but we can do it on the screen. So it kind of has that feel to it. So what we've done is we incorporated the video into the content. You'll see it in our editorial. Where there's a print edition, we would swap out a photo for the video and it would go on there. And it looks so cool. It's a nice effect. So that's to engage more people who want that whole multimedia aspect to it.
You know, I think that's awesome and definitely unique and something just different. You know, I think it's more people are more apt to read and to interact with something, unfortunately, that is more entertaining than just reading. Even though I'm with you. Some like to hold something and read it. I find that it's very difficult for me to, like, be on the computer and read something.
Yeah.
Like, it's straining on the eyes. It's difficult. It's much easier to just read
Yeah.
a book, unless it's audio, and then I don't necessarily have to, like, look at it for hours, I guess. But
Yes.
I just don't feel like I consume or, like, remember as much when I do that. It's better to read. I think they've shown that statistically too. And
Yeah. And that might be the next phase, is go into audio stories, features, you know, instead of a whole book, you know, short one.
yeah,
Yeah.
no, it sounds interesting. I think there's definitely room for creativity. I think that's what it's gonna require. But I even think podcasting in some ways is really just a talk show reinvented. I think we're just going to see a continuation of reinventing to some degree.
And since you bring that up, we have our own podcast as well.
Okay.
We call it ETV for the video, and we call it Embrace on Air for the podcast. And we incorporate all that. So our podcast has like a 60 minutes type feel to it, but a 30-minute version. We have 3 different stories that may appear in a particular issue, and we cover it as a theme. So what you see in the pages, we recreate in a talk show environment, but then I'll also bring new perspectives. A different person who wasn't in the written story, but who has a unique take on what we're talking about, and we'll add that to the podcast. So everything is multimedia and interactive.
You know, I think that's awesome and very interesting. The whole reason why I ever started doing podcasting for myself is I love to know people's stories.
Yeah.
And I find that just very entertaining and interesting, because I think everybody has a story to tell, whether it's good, bad, or indifferent.
Yeah.
And there's always some value to it. And I think in the gay community, it's even more so needed to highlight. I think there's not enough of us out there that talk and, like, contribute to society, and they hear our voice. I think if we had some more of our voice in there, maybe people would be more receptive, I guess.
I think that'd be cool.
Yeah, it would be really awesome. So I kind of want to talk a little bit about your goals for 2024.
Sure.
I know you've been nominated, and there's just, like, a lot going on with you this year.
Yeah, so I wanted to share some of the awards we got here. This is through the Florida Magazine Association, and these are our Magazine of the Year awards. We got our first in 2021, making history as the first ever startup magazine to get Magazine of the Year in the first year, the inaugural year, having also had new Magazine of the Year, Best Overall Magazine of the Year, Charlie's, and then that. And no one's ever achieved that before, so we made history.
That's
and yeah, and I don't think anybody's going to duplicate it again. Well, everybody said, John, enjoy it because that's never going to happen again. Lightning don't strike twice in the same place. I'm like, really? Sounds like a challenge. Challenge received. So 2022 was a restructuring period, but by 2023 we got our second one.
Awesome.
Yeah, so we're actually the second magazine in history of the FMA to get Magazine of the Year twice. One other magazine got it back to back. But we're the second one to achieve it. We're the first LGBTQ publication member, which was the organization was established in 1953. Wow. Charlie's was established in 1958, and 2021 we're the first member. Embrace Magazine also has the distinction of being the first member of the Associated Church Press, which was established in 1916.
Wow.
And we were members in 2021, so over 100 years. And finally, the first LGBTQ publication made it in there. But what we have planned for 2024, this is very exciting for me. I actually just booked my flight and hotel today.
Awesome.
The GLAAD Media Awards has nominated our feature, Heroism Over Hate, which appeared in our Heroes issue, for Outstanding Print Article.
Okay, awesome.
Yeah, and the GLAAD Media Awards, as everyone knows, is a prestigious worldwide organization. It honors LGBTQ media in film, TV, radio, broadcast journalism, print journalism, on and on, books and everything. So it's going to be huge. It's so huge that they divide it between LA and New York. They do half of the program in Los Angeles next month, March 14th, I believe, and the other half in New York City, May 11th, and that's the one I'm going to. They gave us the breakdown. And so this feature story had Rich Fierro, who is one of the two men who took down the gunman in the Colorado Springs shooting.
Okay.
This is the story, and that's Rich right there.
Okay.
And the other gentleman was Thomas James. Rich is straight and Army vet. Thomas James is Navy and LGBTQ open. But Rich is the one who shared his story with me. Okay. And when I interviewed him, I would say the more detail, the better. And he gave me such great, rich detail that made for strong narrative journalism, which is what I like to do. It's kind of like storytelling more than anything else. Okay. And so we'll be there in New York, and I'm so excited about that. Britney Spears was a former winner of a GLAAD Media Awards, and other famous people like her. So the very idea that we're in the same, realm was super exciting.
Yeah, no, that's super cool. I know. I'm sure it's just been a fun adventure so far, just, achieving something that you've worked really hard for most all of your career to succeed upon. Well, towards the end of the podcast, what I always like to ask is, and you kind of talked about it, and maybe you can elaborate, is what, if somebody wanted to do what you've done, you start like some type of magazine publication at some point, what does that look like? How would you do that?
Sure.
Yeah.
Well, many people actually approach me because they want to start their own startup magazine. And so what I tell them is use a year to do your marketing and find out what the target base is going to be, what in your specialty the interest will be. Like, you have to know what target you want to reach. Is it going to be local, statewide, national? Who the advertising is going to be? Do your research, do your homework, lay the groundwork before you get started on it. And then you're really going to want to establish a strong team. I'd be nowhere with this magazine if it wasn't for our designers and the top talent that we've recruited across the state. And that all comes from me having worked with people in the industry, building strong relationships with them so I can call upon them for it. Our first designer was Joe DeLeon, who is, again, an allied man and a strong Christian. He was involved in my first publication, Elevate, which is a faith-based publication. I didn't know if Joe would want to come on board with Embrace, but he actually encouraged me to do it. He said, John, that's more your wheelhouse. Why did you do that in the first place? And he goes, I'd love to help out with that. So having that kind of a team would be important, I would say, to anybody starting a magazine. The next thing I would say is be very cautious or understanding about what the industry is like and where it's headed, so accommodate for that. Don't be too rigid, be adaptable to all types of things. So that's what I would encourage anybody with a startup magazine.
Okay, I think that's great advice, and I think it's important that anything that you do is to really focus on creativity and, you know, go with the flow, because in the world we live in, everything's constantly changing.
Yes.
Nothing ever stays the same. I don't think anymore, honestly. But
I agree.
especially when it comes to media of any type, whether it's written, TV, video, podcasting, whatever. Even I find myself, you know, as a realtor doing marketing, it's constantly changing. You know, it's exhausting the amount of time. I don't think people realize that it takes to follow social media trends and what's going on and all of that. Same thing with, like, you know, with doing magazines and video. It's just it's never ending.
It's never ending.
It's a lot of work.
It is.
Well, it was a pleasure, John, and I really
appreciated
you coming on and sharing your advice and what you've accomplished. I think it's awesome.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.